Welcome back to Disney Unpacked. It's me, Len Testa, and yeah, that's not how we normally start an episode of this show with the fancy video titles from Imagineer Jim Shull that he creates right up front. But then again, this month's Disney Unpacked is different. We've done a lot of things that we've never done before, like posting 4 podcasts out ahead of a new video.
5 if you count the bonus Great Movie Red show.
I stand corrected then. 5 podcasts out ahead of a new video. But I have to ask the question, guys. Does the development of the Extraterrestrial Alien Encounter show really need this much exposition?
Len, we can clear our throats and fill an entire show. So, yeah, it does indeed. If we want to tell the whole complete story, it takes that much time.
By the way, that's my co-host, veteran Imagineer Jim Shull.
Yes, I'm clearing my throat, but I'm glad to be back with you guys.
And the guy you heard earlier was entertainment writer Jim Hill.
Also, greetings.
All right, but does this story really need this much storytelling?
Oh, yes, it does. Because you see, long runways are very important when the plane is taking off is as large as heavy as our plane. As we covered in our Disney Unpacked audio podcast, Alien Encounter just didn't happen clear out of the blue. It didn't happen overnight. It happened over a very specific and due to a unique set of events that had to fall a certain way for it to happen at all.
Yeah, like how Mission to Mars at both Disney Park in California and the Magic Kingdom in Florida had become non-preferred capacity.
Okay, the only other time I've heard the phrase non-preferred capacity, Jim Hill, is on my Delta boarding pass. What does that mean? That means that the attraction isn't pulling its weight?
Non-preferred capacity, Len, is one of those unique and very specific terms that Imagineers use. Usually it's forwarded by the industrial engineers because they're the guys who do the math of whether a park draws the attendance that justifies the capital that was invested, which means that even though a ride, show, or attraction may get a lot of people, if it doesn't pull its weight, as opposed to something else down the street that's more bright, more shiny an object, it's considered non-preferred.
Okay, and then what was the capacity supposed to be for Mission to Mars?
Oh, Mission to Mars. It was about 1,600 an hour when it all performed as it was required, as it was expected, and people found and walked in the front door.
Okay, so 1,600 people an hour, that's basically Big Thunder Mountain Railroad over the course of 12 hours, 19,200 people a day, 20,000 people if you do it right. Okay, that math makes sense.
Yeah, and the math always wins in every case because what the managers were looking for here at Disneyland and eventually at the Walt Disney World Magic Kingdom, they were looking for a show, any show that would fill and pack the Tomorrowland theater facility that was there. I mean, this thing had been there in Anaheim since 1955. But of course, over time, shows don't draw the way they did as they did when they first opened. And that was the case in Anaheim.
The American Adventure. Sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Was I?
No, it's okay.
Go ahead.
Which brings us to Disney getting the theme park rights to the characters and settings of Ridley Scott's Alien.
Oh, this was for a Great Movie Ride?
Oh, hold on there. That was only for the initial use of this character. I mean, why would Disney buy worldwide rights for something when they only thought they'd ever possibly use it in one specific attraction in one specific park? But on the heels of the huge success that Star Tours had been there in Anaheim when it first opened to guests.
Oh, that was the first Star Wars themed attraction in a Disney park, right?
And you got it in one. And the fact is that after the success of Star Tours, it was assumed that anything using an intellectual property from a hit film would be just as successful, if not more so. So therefore, the smart people in Burbank and Glendale decided, I know what guests would like. I know what they want to see. I know what they want to been asking for and crying for. They want to be face to face with the xenomorph, the dripping alien from the movie by Ridley Scott that we all know and love, Alien.
Okay, I'm sorry. This kind of seems like a stretch to me. I mean, Star Wars has its dark side. I get that, but it's a whole different matter when we talk about how dark and gruesome Aliens is in comparison.
Well, now, but what's interesting about that, Len, is the Imagineers actually had data to back up this decision. When they interviewed guests after they'd experienced a great movie ride, they asked people what their favorite scene out of that attraction was, and a surprising number of these people said it was the scene with Sigourney Weaver aboard the Nostromo.
And in the Nostromo, that's what the Imagineers built there in the Disney MGM studios as an opening day attraction where they featured not one, but two xenomorphs that jumped out from the wall or dropped down from above, both of which got to drip on you as you drove by happily after having seen the wonderful and magnificent John Wayne.
All right. So, Jim Shull, two things. One, I remember the first time I saw the alien come out of the ceiling. Because remember, it wasn't just that it was in the ceiling. There was a fog effect that was obscuring the alien until the last possible minute when it came down at you. It was a great little bit of Imagineering. So the interesting thing to me is this: like the alien scene in Great Movie Ride, it can't be more than a minute and a half, right? And you're in a moving ride vehicle, so you're only there for like a few seconds. And on another side of this, you have got what?
Okay, you enter in the Nostromo, I want to say, through the Western scene where you see John Wayne right after the bank robbery. And then you exit into the Well of Souls, that scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark where Indy and Sala are trying to extricate the Ark of the Covenant, and they're surrounded by all those animatronic snakes.
This is the lighthearted vacation that all tourists want. A couple of interesting things here. Okay, Nostromo is Italian for shipmate. So everyone involved, Jim and Jim, should have been asking what that meant from day one, right? I mean, if you guys come on board my ship and I say, hello, Jim and Jim, welcome aboard the Unsinkable 2, what's your first question? Right? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. But okay. All right. Fair enough. You're out of the dark corridors in the ride, right?
Mm-hmm.
The spaceship's about to blow up. Sure. Clanking chains, a bunch of stuff dripping from the ceiling, right? It's goo, like this goo substance.
Hold on, stop. Now, in its defense, that's not goo. That's actually highly purified potable water, which means it's regular water that could be dropped on a guest and it would do them no harm.
You said Florida water and harmless in the same sentence, Jim, and that's impressive.
Well, it's the marsh was taken out. It was strained. The algae was left in the sewer.
Since we're here, Jim Shull, we're talking about this. Is the goo supposed to be blood or drool?
That's the interesting thing, because if I stand, I'm trying to remember from the Alien movies. Is it? I want to say it's the blood that's supposedly made out of acid that can melt through metal. So I guess I'm hoping it's drool.
Well, this is like the worst dating game set of questions ever. What's your favorite bodily fluid?
I'll take the blood because I don't want the acid eating drool. No.
All right. Okay. But we're in and out of this one scene in 60, 70 seconds, right? And it's one of many scenes in the Great Movie Ride. Let's be honest. I mean, you started off pretty slow. I think everyone enjoys sort of the brief scare that you get in Aliens, and then you get to laugh at yourself for being scared, right? But that's different than what we got in Extraterrestrial Alien Encounter, right?
Yeah.
How long was that?
I want to say that the show in the actual theater was 10 minutes long.
Okay, so 60, 70 seconds to 10 minutes. Okay. And you guys, if you remember for this, you were locked in a harness, right? The thing that restraint came down.
Hold on, Mr. Testa. I have to challenge you on that because
Jim Shull and the lawyers have something to say.
Well, if anyone ever in Imagineer tried to say, here we are, we have a theater full of people that we're going to lock into a harness, probably they wouldn't have cut the check. But if you called it, a horse collar. Horse collar sounds happy. There was horse collar. He was a cartoon character. Horse collar sounds so much better. And the reality is, horse collar was the device's name, and the reason for that is it served a purpose. and it served several purposes. One of them was, of course, the natural and most important one, which is this was a binaural sound show, 3D sound. And they had to put the microphones and the broadcast loudspeakers as close to your ears as they possibly can, hence the horse collar. The second thing is a horse collar, just like the name implies, it keeps you from looking left or looking right, because the Imagineers who designed the show wanted you only to look ahead, because ahead was where all the action was going to be occurring.
Jim Shull, didn't I hear that Eisner thought the plot needed a suspense beat, like something suspenseful to happen in the middle of a story instead of just carnage? Or am I misremembering that?
Well, they decided that carnage to guests is a bad thing, but carnage to cast members, it's okay. So what they did was they used the catwalk that was already installed in that facility in both of the theaters, and they assigned a cast member whose sole job was, when they got the cue, to stand and turn on their flashlight and then walk around the catwalk over the head of the guests and wave that flashlight along while you heard in the horse collar through those speakers what the cast member was saying, which is basically, hey, I know there's an alien up here somewhere. Let me go look for the alien. Oh my goodness gracious. What's that thing with teeth that's dripping? Oh, this is not going to end well.
So that was a real cast?
Honest to God, until right now, I did not know that was a real person.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a real person.
Amazing.
Got paid very well. And again, you got to back up the truck for a moment. As with all attractions in a Disney park, you don't sit there for your full 8 hours. You're on the clock. So the person who's up on the catwalk in 20 minutes is probably down there, wishing you a goodbye. And be sure to go over to Fantasyland as you exit, because that's the way that ride or attraction worked, in the same way that every single attraction worked. But anyway, back to our friend, he or she, up there in the catwalk. Now, let me notice the fact that, the catwalk employee had a cabled flashlight. Now, I say cabled because in their show beat, they're supposed to, as they're being eaten, drop their flashlight onto the catwalk metal. So you'd hear the sound of the catwalk clanging as the flashlight fell on it, and as the poor employee met their unfortunate end. But the cable was attached to the flashlight, because goodness forbid that flashlight actually ever fell on the guests below in their harness.
Okay, I remember this part of the show. You got like the briefest look at the monster right as it was going for the employee, right? And I think, wasn't there? Okay, if I'm remembering this right, wasn't there like a night vision scope thing up on the wall where you could track the?
There was.
And then you see the things coming together, and then you get splashed with gore, blood.
Yeah, the whole sequence was, again, they used the kit of parts they had. They already had the monitors there, but what they did was they added this new scene of, through the employees on the catwalk's eyes, looking at, not using their night vision, to see the alien as it suddenly lunged toward them, and then the image went blank. I mean, leaving your imagination, to think about it. But anyway, what happened there again was the audience below, the poor unfortunate soul, they were splattered by, something. Our good friend,
Goo.
Potable water.
Oh, was it really? It was water again?
Well, they ran out of goo. What can I say? Goo was expensive that year.
Okay, all right. All right, kids, this is what passed for entertainment back in Disney parks in the 90s. Fun times.
The interesting thing is, if you made your way through, remember, there was a queue space in front of the theater, went back and forth. There was one moment in the queue where there was something set up that looked not quite right. And I'm talking about, I actually was right under the marquee for Alien Encounter, and there was these temporary barriers set up, and this partially open manhole, and these giant cables going straight through, electrical cables down into Rocket Tower Plaza.
I do love the nod there to the real Rockefeller Plaza in New York City.
As do I. as do I. But again, this thick set of electrical cables, they come off the marquee, they go straight into the ground, and the visual message that you're supposed to be getting at this point is whatever you're about to see in this building may not be safe. I mean, literally, here's electrical equipment out in the open behind, like, those little triangle barriers. And also, just suppose evidently you were supposed to get the sense the show inside, a lot of this may have been slapped together at the last minute. I mean, it may not be safe.
I'm so glad that at least 2 people got that, because the reality is, look, the fact is people on vacations, they are not looking at their feet except to make sure there's not a curb to trip over. No, they're looking ahead of them. They're looking at their watch or their phone now or whatever, but they didn't get that. They didn't get the idea that, oh, there's an open manhole. Oh, there's a cable connecting to this tower over my head. They just kind of strolled on in and they walked on by all the legal signs that told them you should be careful. There's a height limit. They just went in to have a good old time because, I mean, remember this, that attraction, Alien Encounter, where there was going to be an alien killing people in a few moments. That's right across the plaza, 50 feet away from the Delta Dream flight, where you too could go and see all the wonders of planet Earth and, have a good old time.
That's the thing. You're walking down Main Street, right? Oh, pretty Cinderella Castle. You turn right, like, oh, Robin Williams, timekeeper, haha, funny, right? Delta Dream flight. Ooh, let's go places. Alien Encounter. We're all gonna die. Like, what?
Yeah. It's like if you walk, can you imagine walking by, down Main Street past the barbershop and then you go inside and it's Sweeney Todd and
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's not the same thing.
I mean, great setup for a movie, maybe not for a theme park.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Again, in the very same queue we're talking about here, you regularly walk by signs that clearly state the extraterrestrial alien encounter is a frightening theatrical experience in a confined setting with loud noises and moments of complete darkness. And this attraction may be too intense for children and some adults. I mean, they put the warnings in writing at eye level and then displayed them prominently in multiple places in the queue. Again, so, okay, I get what you're saying, but the visitors to the Magic Kingdom had to know what they were getting themselves into.
Jim Shull, did they have to know? Did they have to know?
They should know, Len, but the reality is a third of the guests at Disney World are from outside the United States. So they may speak English, but it's not their first language. Also, Disney's really good. They train the guests very well because, look, there's a marquee, there's a warning sign, there's legal requirements, there's legal language. People know that, oh, that's always going to be there. And so if there's one more legal sign telling them, beware, oh, they just look at it and breeze on by because every other time they've seen that kind of sign, they had a great time. Nothing ever happened to them. They're a good one.
All right, guys, something's been bugging me this entire show. The monster in Alien Encounter isn't the same creature that we see in Ridley Scott's Alien movie. So when did that get changed in the attraction?
Well, okay, I've heard a couple of things. So one actually circles around, we've talked at length in the show about, is it the drool? Is it the blood? Which of those is acid? And evidently, when they were play testing this in Glendale, and making clear, oh, by the way, this is the same alien from the Ridley Scott film. And then they would, as Mr. Shull has been very clear to say, when they dribble the potable water on people would still freak. Because
okay, that's understandable, right?
Okay, and then there's the other aspect of this. Supposedly, when Disney secured the theme park rights to the original Alien movie for the Great Movie Ride, well, the terms of that deal were very, very specific, and they were only for that one ride and only in that theme park. So when it came time to, that we want to use Ridley Scott's alien character in a different attraction that would have been located in a different Disney theme park, they had to go back to Fox, and that would have been a different licensing deal and evidently a larger pile of money.
And Disney wasn't willing to do that right off the top.
Not this time, not for that reason. I can't confirm, I can't deny what Mr. Hill has shared with us here, but I can say that when the Alien Encounter finally officially opened to guests there in June of 1995 and failed to connect with the guests to that Magic Kingdom attraction, well, finally that kind of put the stake in its heart. And the Disney executives walked away and said, well, we tried.
And also worth noting here, if you go back and look at the news reports in June of '95 when this thing opens, numerous newspapers report that Disney spent an additional $10 million on the retooling of Alien Encounter, again, between January and June of that year. They can't have spent all of that on the catwalk and the flashlight, Shul, can they?
I mean, $10 million in that short of, that's Jeff Bezos' wedding money at that in 1994 dollars, right?
Yeah. Well, those weed whackers and drool don't cut a sheet. What can I say? The reality is, on the other side of this, the Magic Kingdom in Florida found itself, after all of this time, after all of this effort and all of this money, they found themselves right back at square one, back where they started. So here they are. After all of this, they still had the old theaters that were underperformed or closed. They had been transformed. They couldn't go back and suddenly say, oh, well, we give up. We're going to put Flight to the Moon, Mission to Mars back in those old theaters. That ship has sailed. And so they're back to where they were originally there 24 years earlier in 1971. But now they didn't have a show.
All right, so I forget, Jim Shull, this had originally started as Flight to the Moon, then Mission to Mars, and then Alien Encounter. So 0 for 3. All right, so like J-Lo and Ben Affleck, the third time was not the charm here. Okay. The amazing thing to me, and I commented on this when I started writing the unofficial guide, was that they knew from day one that this was not a popular attraction. And yet it like limps along for years. But then eventually it switches to seasonal status where Disney doesn't want to kill it. They need the capacity for peak times and stuff like that. During Christmas, the absolute busiest time of the year, right? And it just lingers that way for what, like a decade?
Yeah, well, the reality is capacity, even, a non-preferred capacity still counts. And they're trying to carry so many people per day in the Magic Kingdom, which, as you said, is the most popular park. So they needed that capacity, even if people went to a show they didn't particularly like or actually hated. They didn't have a solution. They didn't have a solution for a long, long time. And so, as you said, they limped along because they still had theaters, and they still had theaters that would entertain 1,600 guests an hour.
Yeah. And entertain is in air quotes there for you guys who are listening to the show. Yeah. it was they were excited. Let's give it that. All right. So, but Jim Shull, at some point, right, we get into like the mid 2000s. Does Disney start thinking new show concept here? Or like at what point do we decide enough's enough and we really need to do something here?
Well, at the end of the day, they decided on this. Maybe the idea behind Alien Encounter was not the worst idea that they'd ever had, but it's possible that maybe they'd bet their horse money on the wrong alien.
And guys, this is probably just as good a time as any to jump in and say, this story will be continued later this month with a second video that Mr. Testa, Mr. Shull, and myself will do that will then explore the history of Stitch's Great Escape.
Just imagine if it could have been Alf's Great Escape. That would have been a completely different attraction.
Again, anyway. But the studio. Should have been the studio. Okay.
All right. Well, thanks to Eric Kersey for producing this episode of Disney Impact. And with the next show, guys, we'll have a far shorter runway, right?
Well, I'm going to go check with Mr. Hill. He's in charge of all the planes on our tarmac.
Okay. 2 new podcasts are Patreon, 3 at the max.
And while you're waiting for those shows to be posted, I want to remind you about our weekly editions of the Disney Dish podcast, not to mention Mr. Shull's Disney Journey series over on YouTube. Those are both well worth seeking out. That's going to do it for the show today. Thanks as always to all of our Patreon subscribers for supporting our creative efforts. We honestly couldn't do it without you. All right. For myself, Len, and for the 2 Jims, we'll see you on the next show.